Hey guys, this is a recording of our help session on October 11th, and today we're going to be talking about how to define a vector again. We're going to be talking about how we can manipulate vectors in order to find the standard deviation with probabilities. So this is an example question that you might have, and it says McCombs students can be enrolled in either 0, 1, or 2 business classes. And the probability of them being enrolled in 0 is 0.2. The probability of them being enrolled in 1 is 0.4. The probability of them being enrolled in 2 is also 0.4. So we see all those probabilities add up to 1, so this is a good thing. And we will first make a vector of the classes. So we will call it classes. And we define a vector with C, and I'm going to put 0, 1, and 2 because those are the class options. Now I'm going to make a second vector of the probabilities, and that is we're going to use C again, and we are going to put 0.2, 0.4, and 0.4. And we want to make sure the 0 and the 0.2 match up, the 1 and the 0.4 match up, and the 2 and the 0.4 match up. So we define classes, and it shows up in our values. We define probabilities, and it shows up in our values as well. And we can multiply these two vectors together. So I'm going to say class times prob is going to be another vector, which is classes times prob. And when I run that, my new vector shows up right here. And we can kind of look and see if that is what we want it to be. It should be 0 times 0.2 gives me 0. 0.4 times 1 gives me 0.4, and 0.4 times 2 gives me 0.8. So if a question asks you to find the expected value, you're going to multiply your one vector times your other vector and find this new vector, and then you're going to sum class times probability, and when we sum that, we get our expected value of 1.2. So what that means is that we expect the average McCombs student, all of them aggregated together, are going to be in about 1.2 business classes on average. So the other thing we want to go over is how to make a vector of the squared deviations to find the standard error, the standard deviation. So we have our mean, our expected value. I'm going to call that expected value. And we have our classes, and we have our probabilities. So to make a vector of the squared deviations, I'm going to call it squared deviations. And it is going to be a vector of my classes minus expected value. So what we're doing right now is taking the number of classes and then minus the expected value of 1.2 and then the square. When we run that, we can check our work and make sure we did it right. So 0 minus expected value of 1.2 squared is 1.44. 1 minus 1.2 squared is 0.04, and 2 minus 1.2 squared is 0.64. So what we did is just made a vector of the squared deviations. In order to make the standard deviation now, I have to multiply squared deviations times my probabilities. So times squared deviations. So my probabilities times my squared deviations. We're going to bring back that ability to multiply vectors together. I'm going to say prob times those squared deviations that we just calculated. And I got the probabilities times the squared deviations. And how we find the standard deviation is I have to sum my probability times square deviations. When I sum that, I get 0.56. And when I just sum those, this is the square. So the square deviations. So I just summed my square deviations, which means I figured out the variance. And now, when I square root, my variance, I get the standard deviation in the number of classes. And that is all we have to go over for today's Our Help session. If you have any questions about the project that's due on Sunday or about your homework, come visit us or your professors in office hours.